Every character, location, or experience you've read about in my crime fiction novels holds a piece of reality. I'm Helen Taylor. Welcome to the story behind my stories, the video podcast where crime fiction meets my authentic experience. Here, we delve into the real-life inspirations and intimate stories that shaped my novels. Discover how my everyday encounters, adventures, and travels translate into tales as gripping as they are genuine. The story behind my stories goes behind the words on the page to reveal the backstory that inspires my writing. Hit follow or subscribe and ensure you're part of this journey. Good morning, everybody. It's season 5 of the story behind my stories, and I'm really excited to be back. It feels like it's been forever, but I was catching up before. Now I'm in time with the books. So this is for Don't Die For Me, Argentina, which I don't have the print copy yet because we're still a few weeks away from launch. I'm really excited about this one and to tell you the story behind it because it is really a really good story. Very much delves into my childhood and some of my dreams. And unlike Lethal Hill, is no bad stuff. It's all good stuff, just twisted and made darker for the book. So, first off, why set a book in Argentina? Well, in 2024, I went to Argentina. Obviously, because you know that I don't write books about anywhere I've not been unexperienced. So this was as much about the experience as it was the country. And this one leads a little bit away. Lethal Hill had Angela Phillips start as the key part of Goodwin's team. In Don't Die For Me, Argentina, it's Penny. And you'll have to read the book to find out why Penny and Goodwin are in Argentina together. But for this start bit, for this episode 1, which is all about why I ended up there, as I told you before, all of the characters have a little bit of me in them in some way. And whilst Penny definitely doesn't look like me or have the same build as me, as we know, she's petite, sharp-featured, and yeah, much slimmer. But she had the same childhood dream as me. So I'm going to start by reading you an excerpt because in the story you need to know this too. So this is me in the story. This is in Buenos Aires, Goodwin and Penny in a bar. Goodwin raised his glass, a crystal heavy-bottomed tumbler with a Lagavulin Scotch whisky. No ice. Cheers, Pen. Penny raised her glass, rich, dark caramel Courvoisier, and clinked her glass against Goodwin's. Cheers. I'm so glad that's over. Now we can enjoy what we really came here for, she giggled excitedly. Goodwin nodded. A little bit more excitement for you than me, I feel. How on earth are you going to cope off-grid for the next week? If you've read any of my other books, and if you haven't, in Connecting Trains is when Penny gets introduced, and she is a tech wizard. And then she writes a little bit of tech in Aloha Goodbye, which has a link here to Don't Die For Me, Argentina. So when you've read this one, or listened to this one, pull back and read the others, as it will give you more insight into Penny's character. You can read it standalone, but let's continue. Penny smiled. It reached her smoky eyes, a look that said she was already off dreaming about the next week. I can't wait. Tech may be my thing. It may seem like I'm always on, always available, whether it's my laptop or some other device. But a total digital detox is exactly what I'm after. Don't you worry about me. I couldn't be more ready for this week. I've waited my whole life. I've dreamt about this day and night as a kid, and now it's all about to come true. I can't wait. It's the only reason I said yes to coming out here for this. She waved her hand, encompassing the whole of the hotel. I'd never be able to afford it otherwise. So, she waited her whole life. This was her dream. Going off grid is scary. It's scary for all of us now. We are so connected with our phones constantly. Me, here at the moment, I'm out in Crete. I've got my laptop, which I'm recording this on, my microphone, which I'm recording this with. I've got my phone. I'm still doing the day job, and that's laptops, phones, need broadband, Sims, everything. We are always able to talk to somebody, to get in touch, to connect. And I hadn't thought about it, I don't think, until I was actually there in Argentina. And they were told us when we booked it, you'd be totally off grid for a week, there's no access. But it wasn't until I got there and we were still 4 hours away from where we were going to start. And we went off grid. And there was literally nothing. The whole week, all our phones said, no signal. The whole week. And that's just not normal, not usual in today's world. I know there are people that choose to go off grid, and we all sometimes have a social media detox. We have lower weeks or days where we might not use our phones as much, but totally off grid completely for all of us would be alien. For Penny, who is a complete digital, it's it's completely out of her comfort zone, totally. And that's why I chose her to be the one that went, because although we could all feel what it would be like to be unable to talk to someone, unable to log onto the internet and Google something, I think that we can all imagine it worse for somebody who is always on. And as I've talked to you before about my writing process, you know, you've always got to have something that just elevates the tension, makes it more exciting or harder or whatever. And for a digital person, that is not having access to digital stuff. So that was why I chose Penny for it. Now I'm going to go back to the childhood dream side of it and read you the extract from a little bit further on Penny's dream, which was my dream. So they're still in the same bar, drinking. She hasn't convinced you to leave the city behind and be a gaucho for a week like me. Goodwin laughed. No, she has not. She knows better. That is never going to happen. I'd happily sit on a quad bike, well, even a motorbike in a push, and travel across the plains and up into the mountains. But horseback? I am not sitting on something that has a mind of its own and could dump me at any minute. He laughed heartily. The tinkle of Penny's laugh joined in. She put her hand on his upper arm as she tried to contain her laughter. I can just see you, landing on your ass, being dumped on the ground by a horse who decided it's fed up with you telling it what to do. They both laughed together. Since Thailand, as Goodwin grew older, being out of his comfort zone was something that he actually almost embraced now, or he wouldn't be here. But there were limits, and a cattle drive across Patagonia was way past his. For Penny, on the other hand, this was what dreams were made of. As a child, before she'd found technology and enjoyed analysing data, through secondary school she was very much an outdoor girl. She found a love of horses from almost the moment she could say the word. She had a natural ability of connecting with animals, more so than within her own species. Her love of horses was so overwhelming when she was young that it was all that figured in her life. As soon as she was able to go to the stables on her own, she never left. Her parents couldn't afford for her to have the horse she desperately wanted. The best thing they could do was a riding lesson every week and the odd entrance fee into the pony club or a local show. So she worked hard at the stables, learning the ropes, studying stable management, and grabbing any offer to look after a horse or ride for free. In much the same way, when she left school and found IT, that line of work honed her skills. IT became her complete focus. All those years, until her mid-teens, immersed in the smells of horse sweat, leather and hoof oil, and the freedom of galloping across open fields after waking with the excitement of what horseback adventures this new day would bring. She filled the time she didn't spend with horses dreaming about them, reading My Friend Flicker and Black Beauty, watching old westerns. She marvelled at the idea of it all. Riding all day, then sleeping under the stars, head resting on your saddle and your horse grazing quietly beside you. Before becoming a talented analyst and software engineer, horses were what Penny Stock's dreams were made of. She'd thought over the years of making that dream come true. Many a late night, as a distraction from work, she'd scour the internet, looking for exactly the experience that would make her dreams a reality now she was older. It was a half-hearted attempt. She'd left that childhood dream back in her teens, and rarely, if ever in the years since, climbed on a horse. Until now. When the option to come here came up, she broadened her search from the home of the Western, the USA, into Argentina. And there, in the wild and remote land of Patagonia, she found the real deal. Yes, she'd be a gaucho, not a cowboy, but who cared? She'd be riding all day, rounding up cattle, sleeping under the stars, with her horse beside her. That was the dream, and that was now 1 day and 2 sleeps away, and she couldn't wait. Just thinking about it here, as she teased Goodwin about joining her, a smile crossed her lips. That was me. So I had horses my childhood. As if you follow along with me, you'll find that the reason I ended up in Thailand and wrote tie-dye was because I had the opportunity to set up a pony trekking into the jungle. So horses took me to Thailand, where I wrote the first novel, but it was horse unrelated. And horses took me to Argentina, but 100% to fulfill that childhood dream. When I was young, I was the same. I started just doing little pony rides up and down the lane at the local stables when I was very young, 2 or 3 years old. By the time I was 6, I was having riding lessons regularly, and by the time I was 8, I was spending my whole life at the stables. When I wasn't at school, I was at the stables. And in those days, because I am 57 this year, in those days, 50 years ago, there was none of us had any phones. And I would just get up in the morning, go to the stables. My mum and dad knew that's where I was, but there was no checking in during the day. And if they desperately needed to get hold of me, they could phone the stables. But I didn't have a phone. And the rule was home before the sunset. And so that was what I did. I'd go out first thing in the morning and spend my whole day at the stables and come home before the sunset. All my friends were horsey people, so when I had sleepovers and things like that, as I got slightly older, again, they were all people from the stables, not from school as much, more the stables. And when I was 12, I went to a convent at school. And we had one Saint's Day off every year. I don't know why, but the one we had off was St. Peter's and Paul's Day, which is my birthday. And so we were going out. That year, it was a trip to Ironbridge. And what they used to do, so that unlike now where they have time off and the parents have to cover the kids at home, the school always used to arrange a trip so that you still went to school, but you went on an outing. So it was fun. And that year, the outing was Ironbridge. And I'd woken up in the morning and gone into my parents' room, and my dad wasn't there. And I went off to school. Mum said, he was fine. Went off to school, but as it turned out, he had broken his neck in a car accident. And he didn't come home for 6 months. He was in hospital in traction, and what I said in there about having my parents paying for riding lessons every week, but not being able to give Penny the horse that she desperately wanted. Same deal with me. My mum and dad couldn't afford it. As my dad would always say, it wasn't the buying of the horse, it was the keeping of the horse. So the feed, the field rent, the livery, everything, added up. And even back then, it was really expensive. So if you're talking 50 years ago, field rent was £5 a week. Now that may not seem very much, and you think, yeah, you can deal with that. But then when you've got feed and all the tack and everything else on top, and the £5 a week 50 years ago wasn't a small amount of money. We lived in a wealthy area and we never really lacked for anything, but my dad worked very hard for it. Obviously, this car accident where he broke his neck, he was self-employed photographer, photographed the Queen, been on all the James Bond sets. He had an amazing photographic career with some really high-profile stuff. But that put him out of action. And being self-employed, if you can't work, you don't get any money. So that made us a little bit financially tight. But when he came out, he couldn't go back to photography because literally in the time he'd been in hospital and rehabilitating, the whole world went from black and white photography to colour photography. And as he developed all his own pictures, that shifted too. So he just wasn't in the same place. And at his age then, which was in his 50s, he did, I think, lost the inclination to start again. It was a different time then. I'm just about to reinvent myself and become a full-time author at my age. But back then, you didn't reinvent yourself and start again at 50 plus years old.
So when he was back in the game, he ended up, my mum went back to work to support us, and my dad ended up, he lectured at a local college, photography course, stuff like that. But what he did was he did photos for the farm and the stables to sell horses. And in doing so, he paid for a Sparky. And Sparky was mine. And when I was younger, I used to ride all the naughty ponies to try and discipline them for when other kids rode them properly. And one of the horses that I rode and I loved was Ruby. And Ruby was bucked a lot. She bucked a lot. Anyway, she had a foal, and I actually saw her foal born when I was 8 years old. Little did I know then that Sparky, her foal, would be mine. But he had inherited his mum's bucking. And when they went to break him in, he literally, 1, 2, 3, 4, dumped them all, bucked them off, and put every one of them in hospital in some way or form. He broke one's thumb, he broke one of them's collarbone. I can't remember what he did to the other two, but basically 4 riders went through. And then the stable said to me, look, you know how his mum bucks. Why don't you try and ride him? So I did. I started riding him, and he never bucked with me once. Now you may think, that's a bit far-fetched. But no. But it wasn't because I was a better rider. It wasn't because I knew how he bucked. He was a one-person horse. And these other people, someone would be feeding him, someone would be turning him out, someone would groom him, somebody would tack him up. And then these other people would turn up to ride him. And he didn't like that. He just dumped them. But because I was at stables all the time, because this was a really exciting thing for me as a 10 or 11-year-old, I loved it. And I just took over the complete looking after him. So I'd go early every morning, feed him, I would turn him out, I would catch him in, I would put his rugs on, I would groom him, and I would tack him up and I would ride him. And it was almost like he was, that's fine. One person and I'm happy. And so we grew together riding. And then I was still at the same convent, doing the same thing, having a outing day on my birthday. But this particular year, this was for my 12th birthday, I didn't go. And I wanted to go to the stables and I wanted to ride Sparky, but Sparky had been kicked in the field and he had a bandage on his leg. And he could be ridden, but I wanted to spend my day, my birthday, with Sparky. And so Mum and Dad had got up and gone off to work, various things, and I was on my bike cycling to the stables, and Old Slade Lane, the stables were on, and it was just one long straight road. You had a little bit on the main road from my house, and then you turned right down Old Slade Lane, and literally at the top of Old Slade Lane was the stables. And you could continue past the stables and go over the bridge, which is where we rode. But yeah, so as I pulled up, Lynette, who was my riding instructor, who I will again say, right back in Friday, when I was given that first piece of advice, write what you know, Jeanette was my riding instructor then. I owe her so much. And then she met me where all the kids used to leave their bikes against the fence, which was odd, why she wasn't busy doing something with the horses. Anyway, she walked with me down, and then she passed me a bucket for Sparky for his breakfast that she'd already made up. And I walked to his stable and looked in his stable, and he had a massive pink ribbon around his neck. And then from the empty stable next door, my mum and dad walked out. And my dad had been taking photos for the stables in order to get me Sparky. And so I got Sparky for my 12th birthday. And it was a dream come true. It was so totally a dream come true. When I write the book of the story behind my stories for Don't Die For Me Argentina, I will go more into how it wasn't as big a surprise as it seemed, and how that whole dream fell apart a few years later. But that was, for 2 years, I had the most beautiful childhood experience with Sparky. And he became what led to this dream of wanting to be a cowgirl and just spend all my days and all my time with my horse there. And that was the same for Penny. And that's what led me to searching and finding this trip in Argentina. And I will talk a little bit more about that next time. But our time is up, and I will see you next week. And it's 3 weeks to launch. 3 weeks to launch, and then you can read the book. So this is ahead of the time. And go ahead and pre-order it now. It is a Western, completely reimagined, and fantastic read.